It's day 17 of my Camino, and I thought I'd give some feedback on my experiences so far, especially for those who might be thinking about doing the Camino themselves. So I've got my phone in front of me just with a few headings of things I jotted down just to share with you. So I just want to start by talking about packing. So I did a video before I left the UK about the things that I was taking with me on the Camino, and actually I would say that I've packed fairly well. Now, having done the Camino or been halfway through the Camino, there are a few things I probably would have reduced in terms of packing. So for example, everything I brought I've used except for the head torch. The head torch was not necessary. I find that a mobile phone for finding stuff in the morning when you're getting up early is more than adequate. But I could have reduced the amount of stuff I brought. So for example, I've brought 3 t-shirts. Actually, I would have been fine with 2. I have 2 long sleeve shirts. I would have been fine with 1. So little things that I could have reduced. I have got 3 underpants. I could have got away with 2. All those things are not particularly great in themselves, but when you combine them all together, it's all extra weight, all the extra stuff that fits the bag. So if I was doing the Camino again, I would be even stricter in what I bring. There was one thing I was going to mention and I forgot when I was recording yesterday regarding carrying packs on the Camino. And there is along the Camino a bag transfer service. So for €5 you can get your bag transferred from the place you're staying to the place where you're travelling to. A lot of people are using this service. Some people are using it throughout the whole length of the Camino so that they can just walk with a day bag just with water and food in it, so they're not carrying such a heavy load. Other people use this service when maybe they need a bit of a rest, or possibly they've injured themselves and they use that bag transfer service for a few days, so they've got time to recover. So it's a good service. A lot of people use it. It's not everywhere, but it's in the vast majority of the albergues. You go in, you find a form, an envelope where you put in your €5 and you write your destination, and then you leave your bag and it gets collected, and when you arrive at your destination, there's your bag. If you have pre-booked an albergue or a hostel or something else, then they will take your bag directly to that location. But if you don't know where you're going to be staying the night, so for example, you know you're heading to a particular town but you don't know where you're going to stay, you can just put the name of the town on the envelope and it will be delivered to a location within that town, and you apparently phone the people and they will tell you where you can collect your bag from. I've not personally used this service, but I know others have, and they've said that it's very effective. So that's just another option, and yeah, if you're not wanting to carry your bag all the way, then there is that bag transfer service, and it seems to be very effective. Also, one of the things that's often debated about is the question about, do you bring a sleeping bag or a sleeping bag liner? Now, I actually have both, but I found that I'm using my sleeping bag far more than my sleeping bag liner. I've used my sleeping bag a few times, but when I did use it, I woke up in the middle of the night and I found myself being a little bit cool. And at the moment it's 32 degrees and it's very, very hot. But some of the places that you're stopping at on the Camino are quite high. So at the moment, although I'm in the Meseta, which is the northern plains of Spain, it's actually over 800 meters high. So when I did use a sleeping bag liner, a couple of times I found myself feeling a bit cold. And I therefore prefer using a sleeping bag, and if it's warm I sleep on top of the sleeping bag, but sometimes during the night I might just throw it over me a bit like a blanket. So personally, and it is a personal thing, I prefer a sleeping bag. You can bring a sleeping bag liner and you can borrow or hire blankets, but personally I'm less keen on that because you don't know how clean those blankets are. So yeah, packing packing light, that's the key. And as I say, I think on the whole I've done pretty well, but if I was doing this again, I would reduce the amount of things I bring, because what I'm finding, for example, with t-shirts is I wear a t-shirt, then at the end of the day, wash it and dry it, and it's ready for the next day. So you just need 2 t-shirts, things like that. One of the key things, though, when you're coming on the Camino, and this is something where I sort of came a bit unstuck, is shoes and socks. Shoes and socks are absolutely crucial. Now, again, in the video I did before I came away, I showed the shoes that I was bringing on the Camino, and I thought these were the ideal trail shoes. But I really struggled with blisters in the first week of the Camino, so much so that I ended up actually going to a local hospital for help. Now, I ended up actually sending those shoes back, and I bought new shoes. Now, it's not really advisable to buy new shoes midway through a very long walk, but I ended up buying some really good, very breathable shoes, and I think that has made a big difference. So my advice on coming on the Camino, particularly if you're coming in the summer months, you want shoes that are comfortable, but you also want shoes that are going to be breathable. Now, I do see people walking in Gore-Tex boots, and some of those people have been absolutely fine, but mine were waterproof shoes, trail shoes, and I think they just didn't allow my feet to breathe enough, and as a result of that, my feet started to sweat, and that's why I developed blisters. The other really critical thing is buying the right socks, and I cannot overemphasize this enough. Getting the right socks can make all the difference on your Camino experience. So I bought 3 very good quality hiking socks from the UK, but 2 of the ones I bought I actually think are just too heavy for the temperatures that I'm walking in. So I actually ended up in one city buying a new pair of hiking socks. So again, you want to go for socks that are lightweight and that are going to allow your feet to breathe. It was advised to me trail running socks are actually quite good at that. So socks and shoes is really the most important thing you can get before you come on the Camino. And believe me, blisters are no fun at all. And if you're not careful, it can ruin your Camino experience. So make sure you get the right shoes and the right socks. I just also want to talk a little bit about the albergues, or the hostels that you stay in, and the question about, do you book or not. Now, when I came over with Paul and Julie, we booked in advance our first 2 nights stay, and if you're starting from St. John and Roncesvalles, which is the first stop after St. John, I think it is advisable to book accommodation. And in that week that I was with Paul and Julie, we tended to book a day in advance, and that was no problem. But since I've been doing the Camino on myself, I've actually stopped booking in advance, and I've just been walking to my destination and finding accommodation, and I've had no problems. I've managed to find somewhere to sleep every night. So I think particularly if you're a solo traveller, I'm finding that finding somewhere to stay has not been an issue. Now, where it might be an issue is towards the end of the Camino, the final stage, the last 100 kilometers, because that is very busy and lots of people just come and do that final section of the Camino. So I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to book accommodation there or not, but I'll make that decision when I get a bit closer. So what is it like to actually stay in the hostels? Well, actually, generally speaking, I'd say my experience of the hostels has been pretty good. The one thing you need to be prepared for, though, is obviously people will snore during the night, and you just got to get used to that. That's part of the Camino experience. Bring a good pair of earplugs if snoring bothers you. The other thing you need to get used to is that people get up very early, and the reason for that is it gets very hot, and you really don't want to be walking beyond 12 o'clock in the day, because it really is just too hot, especially at the moment. We're in a heat wave, so tomorrow, for example, it's going to be 36 degrees. So people get up. Some get up as early as 4 o'clock, but certainly between 4 and 5:30 is quite common. And I've got into that routine as well. I actually really like walking first thing in the morning, watching the sunrise. So, you know, most people get up very early, walk for maybe 6-7 hours, and then stop at their destination maybe 12, 1 o'clock, and then rest, and then do the same the next day. But generally speaking, experience of the hostels has been great. No problems at all. Security. Some people may wonder, how safe is the Camino? Now, I can only speak from personal experience, but I have felt incredibly safe walking the Camino. I've never once worried for my own safety. But also in the hostels, I found things have been quite safe. Some hostels provide you with lockers where you can store your belongings, your possessions, but many of them don't. But amongst the people doing the Camino, the pilgrims, and these are hostels just for pilgrims, there is a sort of unwritten code that people respect one another's property and possessions. So I've had no problems. Obviously, you take sensible precautions. So when I go to a hostel, I will carry with me my phone, my GoPro camera, my wallet. But I leave all my other things there in the hostel, and I've had, so far, no problems at all. So generally speaking, security is fine. I've also met lots of women, single women, doing the Camino by themselves. And again, just from experience, from talking to people, I've not met anyone who's had any issues. So I think the Camino is a safe place. Lots of people doing it. Security is good. Food. Just want to mention something about food. So I'm a celiac, and that is an autoimmune condition, which means I can't have gluten. And one of my big worries on coming in the Camino is, would I find food that I could eat? And actually the answer is, generally speaking, it's not been too much of an issue. You can find gluten-free food in the shops, which I've been doing. But also, if you explain you have a special dietary requirement when you go to these hostels or cafes, often they will provide a pilgrim menu. They do understand, and generally speaking, it's not been too much of an issue. The Spanish do seem to serve bread with everything. Obviously, I can't eat that, so I just have to give that to someone else, or just ask not to receive it. But generally speaking, finding food's not bad. I've also been eating out in restaurants and cafes most of the time, and many of the places will do pilgrim menus, and generally speaking they are between 12 to 15 euros, and that will be a 3-course meal, and I find that really good, and that includes wine and bread and water. So I find that really good. Now, some people may want to cook their own food, but I actually think by the time you go to the shop, buy your ingredients and prepare them, assuming that the hostel you're staying in actually has facilities to prepare food, you're really not saving yourself much time. So I think just using those pilgrim menus, it makes the most sense. What else have we got here? Oh, cash. Yes, so I brought with me some English currency, and I was expecting to be able to exchange that in a bank or a money exchange. And I have found so far that has been impossible to do. They just don't seem to do that in Spain. And I was told that you can exchange money in banks, but you must have an account with that bank, which I don't. And I've not yet found a money exchange place. And I was looking for one in Burgos, which is one of the largest cities on the Camino, and there was not a single place to exchange cash. So just to warn you about that. So you may want to bring cash with you or withdraw cash from a cash point. And it's worth just checking what the exchange rate and what the fees are when you withdraw cash. I've withdrawn some cash from Deutsche Bank because I read online that they don't charge withdrawal fees. So just something to be aware of. Typical routine. So what is a typical routine? Well, I can only speak for myself, but this is what my typical routine is like. So I get up in the morning, usually sometimes 5 or even before 5 to 5:30. I get up, I brush my teeth, and then basically I set off, and then I will walk for about 10 kilometers typically, so about an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, and then I will stop at a cafe and I will get a meal, a breakfast there. So for me that's typically a cafe con leche, coffee with milk, freshly squeezed orange juice, which is lovely, and a tortilla. So, and you're usually paying about €3 to €5 for that. I will then walk another maybe 10 kilometers or so, or have a break on the way, and I aim to reach my destination between 12 and 1 o'clock. I will then check into the place I'm staying for the night, get my bed, pay my bill, and then I will get a shower, and then I will wash my clothes. I'll often have a little sleep, and then later on in the evening I'll go out for a meal, and they go to bed around 9ish. People go to bed very early, but that's because they're walking a long way, people are tired, and people are getting up early, and then go to sleep. And then I repeat that the next day. And you really get into the routine. It's actually really enjoyable. So you do just get into the routine. So that's sort of what I do. I mean, everyone's different, so people may have different routines, but I would say that's fairly typical of the routine that I have. Also, just to mention apps, I've got a couple of apps on my phone. You can get lots of these Camino apps if you just search on your phone, you're in the iStore or on Google Play, and there are some good apps. One I think that's quite good, that I quite like, is one called Camino Ninja. And what I like about the Camino Ninja is you can say where you're going to be starting from, and where you aim to finish, and it will tell you the distances between the towns or the villages, and it will also give you links to the hostels, the albergues, and places to stay. So lots of really good apps. I've also got another one which shows the route of the Camino Francis route that I'm on, and it uses GPS to direct you and pinpoint you. That's really useful. The route itself is very well signposted, so it's quite hard to get lost, but just occasionally the arrows that direct you are not so clear, and I find having that app with the map on really quite helpful, and especially in the morning. One day I set off at 4:40 in the morning, so it was very dark until about 6ish, so that was just quite useful, just so I could check occasionally and make sure I am on the right track. Now, I suspect that there are probably other things that I should have mentioned that I haven't, and if you have questions about doing the Camino, particularly the Camino Francis, then please do comment at the bottom of this video, and I will try and respond to your questions. But there's lots of good forums out there on Facebook, websites where people share tips and resources for the Camino. But this is my experience so far. As I say, I'm about halfway to Santiago, but I think my key advice is, pack light. Make sure you've got good shoes, the right shoes and the right socks, and also just be prepared to embrace it. The wonderful thing about the Camino is you will meet people from all around the world, literally all around the world, and you'll meet some amazing people who have wonderful conversations, and just to embrace the experience. It really is potentially a life-changing journey. So I hope you have a wonderful Camino if you're planning to do it, and if you're watching this video and thinking, should I do it, can I just say yes, go for it. You will meet people of all ages, so you see quite young people, teenagers doing it. I've seen people in their 80s doing it. You've seen people who are really fit and athletic, and I've seen people who are really not fit at all. They look, carrying a bit of weight and so forth. All sorts of people doing it. Some people doing it by themselves, some people doing it as couples, some doing it as groups. But there's a real openness, a wonderful spirit on the Camino. So just do it. It really is absolutely wonderful. And if you've got hesitations and worries about it beforehand, don't. Honestly, it is absolutely fantastic. And for me personally, it's just giving me new experiences. It's pushed me beyond my comfort zone. I'm learning just to take each day as it comes. So I hope that if you do the Camino, you will also find it a wonderful experience. So, buon Camino.